A lot of market participants paying some attention to that report, which suggested that the president had told people around him to begin drafting the terms of a deal in terms of trade with China. But people should be cautious with that report. It is out there, but I've talked to a senior administration official this morning who says there's no truth to it. A senior administration official telling me there's still a long way to go in the negotiations between the United States and China on that. And that mirrors what you've heard administration officials saying publicly throughout the week this week. On Wednesday, I had the opportunity to interview Larry Kudlow, the National Economic Council Director, in the State Dining Room at the White House. Larry Kudlow told me that the negotiations with the Chinese haven't been particularly intense recently, as you would expect if we were actually on the verge of a deal. Here's what he said then.
We haven't had intense talks lately, but there's always communication, so they know. And who knows, maybe, I'm not forecasting, I'm just saying it is possible some good, positive things could, I say could, come out of President Trump, President Xi talks. It's possible.
So on Wednesday, Larry Kudlow, the National Economic Council Director, putting it in very conditional terms, saying that there could be a deal here, but he wasn't promising anything. And the time frame for that he was looking at was the G20, which is at the end of November in Argentina, when we do expect President Trump and President Xi Jinping to meet face-to-face to talk about a number of these issues. Kudlow telling me on Wednesday, though, that the official agenda for that meeting is not even set yet. So it appears that there is a long way to go in terms of those negotiations. The expectation had been for a while that the Chinese would wait until after the midterm elections next week before they began to seriously talk about any deal, because they want to take the measure of President Trump in terms of his political standing. One of the big challenges in all of this is Chinese intellectual property theft. It's a difficult issue to negotiate because theft by its very nature is something that you do in secret and you don't admit to. So how do you prove a negative and prove that the Chinese have stopped stealing American intellectual property? One way that the Department of Justice has been doing that over the past week or so is really cracking down on a number of these instances of corporate espionage by the Chinese. On Tuesday, Chinese intelligence officials were accused of stealing aerospace secrets. On Thursday, the Department of Justice indicted a Chinese state-owned company with economic espionage. So there's been a real crackdown in place. But how do you translate that into some kind of treaty terms or some kind of deal terms to guarantee that the Chinese won't continue to do that in the future? That's the big question, a big challenge here as they continue to negotiate in Washington, guys.
Eamon, real quick, just to the timing issue, because you talked about the midterm elections, the idea that China was waiting to see what the outcome would be. Perhaps there's an incentive for the president to try to get a deal either before the midterms or at least get one going. How do you see the timing of all of this to the extent you think that we could get a deal?
You mean could get a deal before the midterms?
Is that even on the table, or you think that this is...
Look, everything's possible in this world, right, as we've seen. And we saw with the U.S.-Mexico-China deal, things looked very, very dire just before the deal came together. And that's often the way these things work. Everyone throws up their hands, walks away from the table, sometimes for dramatic effect, and then you do get to a deal. But even that one took weeks and weeks after we thought we were ultimately in the zone where there could be a deal. So in this case, I think that people should be cautious with this report this morning. I'm told that it's not true, and I'm told that the two sides are a long way from a deal.
The report is not true that there's a workup for an actual trade pact.
That the president is asking people to actually draft terms of a deal that we're somehow close to a deal.
That's important.
Senior administration official suggesting that we're not close to a deal and that, in fact, there's a long way to go between the two sides.